You wake up in a world that does not care if you're kind, fair, or honest. It only cares if you're effective. And you've been lied to your entire life. You were told that strength comes from being liked, from being gentle, from being passive until the world rewards your patience. But the truth is, the world doesn't reward patience, it rewards power. The silent kind, the strategic kind, the kind of power that Machiavelli wrote about centuries ago, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that builds itself in the dark, and when it arrives, doesn't need to explain anything to anyone.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
You feel it, don't you? That quiet hunger to become more, not just better but ruthless, not cruel but unshakable, not aggressive but immovable. That version of you is buried under years of false humility and fear of judgment. But Machiavelli gave us the keys to dig it out, and we're going to do it together right now. If you've ever felt like people walk over you, ignore you, underestimate you, it's not because you lack talent. It's because you lack ruthlessness. And ruthlessness isn't about hurting others, it's about refusing to let them hurt you. Niccolo Machiavelli said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." That one quote has been misunderstood for centuries. It doesn't mean we should be tyrants. It means we must be strong enough that people think twice before crossing us. Because love is fragile. It fades. It shifts with emotion. But respect is rooted in structure. When people know you have boundaries made of steel, they don't test them. When they know you have nothing to prove, they stop trying to provoke you. Let's go deeper. The first rule of ruthless strength is this: never depend on the loyalty of others, build loyalty to your mission. People will betray you, not because they are evil, but because they are human. When their interests change, so will their allegiance. Machiavelli said, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." If you place your security in the hands of others, you will live in constant instability. But if your loyalty is to your path, your values, your vision, nothing can shake you. You don't need to control people. You need to stop needing them. How do you build that kind of strength? You start by eliminating emotional debt. Every time you do something just to be liked, you go into debt with yourself. Every time you tolerate disrespect to keep the peace, you lose a piece of your own power. And that adds up. Until one day you don't recognize yourself. You're agreeable, but not respected. Present, but not powerful. Machiavelli would say you've become a puppet. And to reclaim your strength, you must cut every string. Now ask yourself, where are you still waiting for approval? Who are you still afraid to disappoint? What parts of your identity are built entirely on other people's expectations? That's where your weakness lies. And that's where we begin the demolition. You must become someone who doesn't flinch when misunderstood. Someone who doesn't chase validation. Someone who can walk away from anything that costs their dignity. That's ruthless strength. That's Machiavellian. Here's rule 2. Control perception, but remain unpredictable. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." That is not deception. It is design. Ruthless strength is not about telling everyone your next move, it's about making them guess. When people can't read you, they can't control you. They can't undermine you. They can't prepare for you. And in a world obsessed with transparency, mystery becomes a weapon. You don't need to scream to be powerful. You need to stop being so easy to read. Learn to use silence as a strategy. Learn to let people talk while you watch. The strongest person in the room is usually the one who speaks last, not first. Because they're calculating, waiting, holding their power instead of bleeding it out through words. Machiavelli would call this the art of presence. And presence is what makes people reconsider challenging you, not because you threaten them, but because something in you feels untouchable. Let's talk about hardship. Because ruthless strength isn't built in comfort. It's built in fire, in betrayal, in isolation, in being underestimated. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince for people who had it easy. He wrote it for those who had to fight for every inch of power they earned. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally, he said. Meaning you must become the type of person who acts when others hesitate, who strikes when others overthink, who moves forward even when the path is unclear. How many times have you waited too long to make a decision? How many times have you known what needed to be done but you hesitated out of fear? That hesitation is the enemy of strength. It's where power dies. Ruthless strength means you act. You cut ties when necessary. You speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. You move forward with or without applause. Because the cost of waiting is always greater than the cost of failing. Here's a brutal truth. Some people will only respect you when you enforce consequences. You can be kind. You can be generous. But if you don't back it with the willingness to walk away and the strength to hold a line, you will be eaten alive. People don't remember what you tolerate. They remember what you allow once, and they test you based on your silence. Machiavelli would say, "A prince who is not himself wise cannot be wisely advised," meaning if you don't lead yourself with clarity, no one else can guide you. So what does ruthless strength actually look like in practice? It looks like not answering every message just to be polite. It looks like saying no without a 5-minute explanation. It looks like walking out of a situation the moment it becomes disrespectful, not after it becomes unbearable. It looks like choosing solitude over superficial connection. It looks like being feared not because you're cruel, but because you never compromise your standards. That is the strength we're building. But here's where most people fail. They confuse strength with harshness. They try to bark instead of bite. They become loud instead of lethal. They want to be seen as powerful without actually doing the internal work. But Machiavelli knew the difference. He wrote, "It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles," which means your identity must be earned from the inside out. Ruthless strength is not a performance. It's an internal code, a discipline, a standard that refuses to break no matter who's watching. Now pause. Think deeply. Who would no longer have access to you if you lived by Machiavelli's rules? Whose voice would no longer echo in your mind? What relationships, habits, fears would be burned to the ground if you stopped being polite and started being powerful? This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. This is not about becoming cruel. It's about becoming unbreakable. Ruthless strength is not the absence of emotion, it's the refusal to be controlled by it. It's the ability to feel everything and still choose the path that leads to power, not pity. That is what Machiavelli was teaching us. Not how to manipulate others, but how to stop being manipulated by ourselves. And once you understand this, everything begins to shift. The way you speak, the way you walk into a room, the way people look at you. They won't always like you, but they will respect you. They will study you. And most importantly, they will not forget you. True strength is not loud. It's not reactive. It's not desperate to prove anything. It's silent, calculated, and untouchable. And the reason most people never build it is because they're too busy trying to be understood. But Machiavelli would tell us that being understood is not a priority, being respected is. He said, "A prudent man should always follow in the path trodden by great men and imitate those who have been supreme. The supreme are not the ones who beg for validation. They are the ones who move in silence and strike with precision." Let's be honest, most of us have been taught to value approval more than power. We've been trained to soften every edge, to filter our strength through politeness, to choose likability over clarity. But that programming is what keeps you stuck. It makes you predictable. It makes you easy to manipulate. And worst of all, it makes you forget who you are. You can't build ruthless strength if you're still addicted to keeping the peace with people who wouldn't show up for you in war. This is where the next Machiavellian rule comes in. Injuries should be inflicted all at once, benefits granted little by little. That sounds brutal on the surface, but it's one of the most psychologically sound principles of power. It means that when you must set a boundary, end a relationship, remove someone from your life, you do it decisively. Not slowly, not with endless chances. You rip the cord. Because slow death by 1,000 cuts is worse for both parties. It creates confusion, resentment, and weakness. Clarity is mercy. Precision is power. Now think about your life. How many people are you still tolerating out of guilt? How many situations are you dragging out because you're afraid of the discomfort of ending them? That hesitation is costing you energy. It's draining your focus. And Machiavelli would say that hesitation is a weakness your enemies can smell. He'd tell you that decisive action, even if it causes pain, is a sign of strength. And that strength, once shown, prevents future rebellion. Another rule, it is much more secure to be feared than loved. Again, this is not about cruelty, it's about predictability. Love is emotional. Fear is structural. People may love you today and leave you tomorrow, but if they respect your boundaries, if they know you don't tolerate nonsense, if they know there are consequences, they will think twice. Ruthless strength is not about making people fear you. It's about making them fear the loss of access to you. That's what real power is, the ability to walk away without explaining. Let's talk about walking away. Most people stay in places that weaken them because they confuse discomfort with loyalty. They think that suffering is noble, that staying quiet in toxic environments shows strength. But Machiavelli would laugh at that. He'd say, "The lion does not ask the opinion of the sheep." Why are you still asking people for permission to leave what's killing you? Why are you waiting for the perfect moment to take back your power? There is no perfect moment. Strength is built in the decision to move now. Ruthless strength also means you are not afraid to be alone. In fact, you seek solitude. You use it to sharpen yourself. Machiavelli believed that a ruler must use isolation to think clearly, free from the noise of public opinion. In the modern world, that means creating space to hear your own voice, to reconnect with your mission, to ask yourself, what am I building? Who is this version of me becoming? And most importantly, what am I no longer available for? You must begin to see your time, your energy, your presence as sacred. Machiavelli would demand it. He understood that power decays when it's overextended. That's why kings live in castles. That's why rulers are hard to reach. Accessibility is not generosity, it's vulnerability. And if you're too available, too easily swayed, too open to input from people who haven't earned it, you've already lost control. Ruthless strength requires gatekeeping, and that begins with you. Let's go even deeper. Every time you complain, every time you vent to people who can't help you, every time you leak your frustrations to the wrong ears, you decrease your power. Because power is not just about what you say, it's about what you withhold. Machiavelli said, "He who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command." And the first command is over your own tongue, your own emotions, your own story. Sharing your struggle with the wrong people is not vulnerability, it's exposure. And exposure can be weaponized. So you must learn the art of selective silence. When to speak, when to withhold, when to strike, when to disappear. Ruthless strength is not about being seen constantly, it's about being seen strategically. People should not know everything about you. They should not understand your every move. They should feel your presence and fear your absence. That's what makes you unforgettable. That's what builds legend. Now ask yourself a hard question. How many people know things about you that they've done nothing to earn? How many people have access to your thoughts, your weaknesses, your goals without proving they're worthy of it? That's not intimacy. That's insecurity. That's a lack of boundaries disguised as connection. Machiavelli would say, the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present, which means loyalty should be conditional, based on alignment, based on results, not history. The next Machiavellian rule you must embody is, a wise ruler ought never to keep faith when by doing so it would be against his interests. That's not about dishonesty. It's about evolution. You are not obligated to keep promises to people who no longer respect you. You are not required to stay loyal to systems that are breaking you. You are not bound by decisions made by a weaker version of you. Ruthless strength requires ruthless clarity. And clarity means knowing when to pivot inward and outward. Let's be very clear. If your strength depends on whether people support you, you are not strong. If your confidence disappears the moment someone disapproves, you are not free. If your power only exists in comfort, you are not ready. Machiavelli would demand more from you. He would tell you that power is tested in chaos, that the throne is not for the soft-hearted but for the sharp-minded. And if you cannot rule over your emotions, you cannot rule over anything. This is why ruthless strength is so rare. It requires emotional discipline. It demands that you stop reacting to insults, stop explaining your boundaries, stop negotiating your worth. It means you don't beg, you don't chase, you don't plead to be chosen. You choose yourself. You protect yourself. You honor yourself not with words but with structure. So here's what it looks like in real life. You stop tolerating half-effort friendships. You stop replying to messages that feel like obligations. You stop saying yes to things that drain your soul. You stop giving explanations for decisions that protect your peace. And you stop feeling guilty for evolving into someone who no longer fits the version of you they preferred. That is not ego. That is evolution. And Machiavelli would call it necessary. Let me ask you something most people are afraid to even consider. Who would disappear from your life if you enforced your standards with zero compromise? How many people are only there because you've made it easy to stay? How much of your suffering is based on the fear of being seen as selfish when in reality, you've been too selfless for too long? That's where ruthless strength is born. In the decision to stop betraying yourself. In the decision to stop asking for permission. In the decision to stop playing the game by rules that were never written for your victory. There comes a moment in your life when you realize that being good is not enough. Being nice is not enough. Being reasonable is not enough. The world doesn't bend for those who are merely good, it bends for those who are powerful. And power in its purest form is not granted, it is taken, it is built, it is earned through discipline, clarity, and a deep internal code that cannot be shaken by praise, criticism, or chaos. This is what Machiavelli taught, not how to be evil, not how to dominate, but how to become unbreakable in a world that's constantly trying to break you. You've been told that ruthlessness is a flaw. But what if it's a virtue? What if it's the only thing that can protect your peace, your mission, your identity? Ruthlessness doesn't mean harming others, it means refusing to harm yourself in order to keep others comfortable. It means choosing alignment over approval, growth over guilt, power over pity. Machiavelli said, "A man who strives for goodness in all his acts is sure to come to ruin." He was not encouraging cruelty. He was warning us about naivety. You can be good, but if you're only good, you will be eaten alive. Ruthless strength is about the long game, not instant gratification, not emotional outbursts, but strategic patience. It's about staying calm when others panic, focused when others doubt. It's about being willing to wait 5 years for a victory most people would abandon after 5 days. Machiavelli believed that fortune favored the bold, but he also believed that boldness without preparation was suicide. That's why he wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." How many times in your life have you delayed action out of fear, only to be forced to do it later under worse conditions? Strength means you act early, you move first, you strike while others still hesitate. I think about your habits. Think about your routines. Are they building the kind of strength that can endure betrayal, failure, isolation, and ridicule? Or are they built around comfort and approval? Ruthless strength isn't about how much you can lift. It's about how much you can carry when everything falls apart. It's about the conversations you're willing to have, the decisions you're willing to make, the people you're willing to walk away from. It's about saying, I'd rather lose everything than lose myself. That's the kind of strength Machiavelli respected. And that's the kind of strength we're building now. One of his most powerful lessons is this: men judge more by the eye than by the hand. Meaning, perception is more powerful than reality. You could be brilliant, but if you move like a coward, you'll be treated like one. You could be loyal, but if you tolerate disrespect, people will assume you deserve it. People don't respond to your intentions, they respond to your presence. That's why you must carry yourself like someone who cannot be broken. Even when you're tired, even when you're unsure, especially when you're afraid. Ruthless strength is not about being emotionless. It's about being emotionally sovereign. You feel everything, but you choose your response. You're not a slave to anger, sadness, guilt, or anxiety. You use them. You turn pain into clarity, fear into focus, doubt into direction. Machiavelli would tell you that the greatest leaders are not the ones who feel the least, they're the shuns who feel deeply, but are never ruled by it. They lead from the center, from an internal calm that cannot be touched by storms. So, how do you build that center? You build it by doing the hard things no one sees. You wake up when you don't feel like it. You train your mind when no one's watching. You say no to comfort when it tempts you the most. You sit in silence and face your demons. You reject the version of you that is addicted to being liked, and you build the version of you that is addicted to being free. Machiavelli would tell you, freedom is the ultimate power, but it is only given to those willing to sacrifice temporary peace for permanent strength. Now, let's talk about enemies, because if you are growing, you will attract resistance. If you are standing in truth, people will try to tear you down. If you are building something real, you will be misunderstood. Machiavelli said, you must know there are two ways of fighting, by law or by force. In today's world, force isn't physical, it's psychological. People will try to shame you, cancel you, guilt you into obedience. But if you are ruthless with your truth, if you are grounded in your values, if you are clear on your mission, nothing they do will work. Because the only people who can be destroyed are the ones who still need approval. Ruthless strength means you are not afraid to be the villain in someone else's story. Not because you're wrong, but because they preferred the weaker version of you. The version that said yes to everything. The version that never set boundaries. The version that tolerated disrespect under the banner of peace. That version is dead. And in its place stands someone who doesn't explain strength. They embody it. They walk into a room and people feel the shift, not because they're trying, but because they've stopped trying. Let me ask you something you've probably never dared to face. If you stopped filtering yourself, if you stopped softening your power, if you stopped choosing comfort over clarity, who would become afraid of you? And more importantly, why were you ever afraid of them? Machiavelli would say that fear is a tool, not something to avoid, but something to understand. He believed that fear, properly used, creates structure, it creates respect, it creates space. And in a world full of noise, space is power. You don't have to yell, you don't have to beg. You just have to hold your line, stay centered, stay still, and let the world adjust to your frequency. This is not about becoming dominant. It's about becoming undeniable. It's not about being emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally invincible. It's not about being feared. It's about being respected so deeply that people don't even consider crossing you. That's ruthless strength. That's the path. And you're already on it. So what does life look like when you've built this kind of strength? You move differently. You speak less but say more. You attract people who match your energy and repel those who can't handle it. You stop seeking opportunities and start creating them. You stop performing for the crowd and start building for the future. You become the kind of person Machiavelli wrote The Prince, for not someone who just survives but someone who rules, who designs, who shapes the world instead of being shaped by it. You don't flinch when betrayed. You don't crumble when things fall apart. Because you've built yourself from the inside out. You faced your weakness and turned it into armor. You faced your fear and turned it into strategy. You faced your pain and turned it into power. That is the highest form of strength, and no one can take it from you. So here's your final question. What version of you are you still protecting that needs to die for the stronger one to live? Because that's the cost of ruthless strength. You must bury the people pleaser, the over-explainer, the one who asked for permission, the one who waited to be chosen. You don't need that version anymore. You don't need to be liked. You need to be powerful.